Absolutely. Here's a long, cinematic, emotional story based on your title, structured for a 15-minute YouTube video, with the hooks, calls to action, and heartfelt narrative included. The rain fell in relentless sheets, drenching the cracked pavement of a small, forgotten neighborhood. The street lamps flickered as if struggling to cast light on the shadows that clung to the walls. In the middle of it all stood David, a man whose worn shoes were caked in mud, his coat soaked through, and yet, somehow, his spirit refused to bow. David had never been a man of wealth or status. He lived in a modest, almost crumbling house at the end of the lane. A house that carried the weight of years, laughter, and tears. But despite the modesty of his home, one thing had never changed. David's door had always been open to anyone in need. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and the incredible power of a helping hand, go ahead and hit like, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? David had faced hardship all his life, orphaned at a young age. He had grown up in a world that often seemed too harsh, too unfeeling for someone with so much empathy. He learned early that money could not heal loneliness, that possessions could not buy love, and that a warm meal shared was worth more than the finest feast in a mansion. Yet, life was never easy. Every day was a struggle to make ends meet. The roof leaked in the winter, the old boiler groaned like a wounded animal, and the grocery bills always seemed just a step ahead of his paycheck. But David had learned a simple truth. Wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the lives you touch. One evening, as he returned from work at the small local factory, David noticed a young woman huddled under the gas station awning, shivering violently in the rain. Her name was Emily, and she had nowhere to go. She had been left by her family, alone in a city that never stopped moving, never stopped judging. David's instinct was immediate. Without a second thought, he offered her a place to stay, a hot cup of tea, and a blanket to chase away the chill. His neighbors whispered, warning him about taking in strangers, about the dangers of generosity in a world so quick to betray. But David never wavered. Over the following weeks, Emily's presence brought both joy and chaos into David's quiet life. She had scars that were invisible to the eye, pain from abandonment, betrayal, and despair. David listened without judgment, helping her find small victories, a warm meal, a safe night's sleep, the courage to step back into the world. Slowly, she began to smile, her laughter filling corners of David's home that had long been silent. And in caring for her, David found a renewed sense of purpose. Life, however, has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. One morning, David returned home to find that the factory had shut down unexpectedly. His paycheck would no longer come, and with the rent overdue and bills mounting, the reality of his situation crashed over him like the same relentless rain outside. For the first time in years, David felt fear, not for himself, but for those who had come to depend on him. But even in his darkest hour, he remembered the faces he had helped, the gratitude in the eyes of strangers who had become friends. And so, he refused to close his door. Word of David's generosity spread quietly through the neighborhood. People he had never met began leaving small gifts, bread, vegetables, even a few coins, at his doorstep. And one by one, lives that had once been broken began to heal under the warmth of his unwavering kindness. There was Marcus, the elderly man who had lost his home to foreclosure, who now tended David's small garden in exchange for shelter. There was Lily, a single mother whose children had once slept in parks, now safe within David's walls. And Emily, who once trembled with fear and despair, had grown into a young woman radiating hope, carrying David's lessons of empathy into every corner of her own life. Time passed, and David's humble home became a sanctuary. Not a place of wealth, but a place where hearts were mended, where laughter echoed louder than the storms outside. He discovered something he had never known: true richness, not in money, not in possessions, but in trust, love, and the unspoken bond of humanity that connected one soul to another. And through it all, David remained the same man, worn, imperfect, and yet endlessly giving. One chilly winter evening, as David watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he realized that every struggle, every sleepless night, every drop of rain had led him here. His life had been far from easy, but it had been filled with purpose. He had learned that doors open for those in need could change not only the lives of the helpless, but also the hearts of those who offered them shelter. And in that quiet revelation, David smiled, knowing that the simplest acts of kindness could echo forever. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that one person's compassion can change countless lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Tell us who inspired you to keep your door open to others, even when life feels impossible. Before we end, I have a special request. Please leave a comment about a time when someone's kindness changed your life. Your story might inspire others to open their doors, just like David did. Because at the end of the day, we may not all be rich in money, but we can be rich in love, in empathy, and in the courage to help those who need it most. And sometimes, that makes all the difference in the world. If you want, I can also adapt this into an even longer cinematic version with more detailed scenes, suspenseful moments, and visual descriptions that would perfectly fit a full 15 to 16-minute YouTube storytelling video. This version would include intense emotional beats, a cinematic flow, and suspenseful pauses for maximum audience engagement. Do you want me to do that next?